Good afternoon. As Amanda said, my name is John Diaz, and I'm at North Carolina State University in the Department of Forestry and Environmental Resources. And before I get started, I want to give a little acknowledgement to my co-authors on this paper, Toddy Steelman and Brandon Noel. I worked with both of them on the Fire Chasers project, and Toddy specifically with Southern Fire Exchange, so I wanted to go ahead and acknowledge their effort as co-authors on this paper, because without them, this would not be possible. So go ahead and get started. This is an outline of what I'll be speaking about today. Start with a brief introduction outlining the situation for this study. I'll present a brief literature review and go over my methods and conceptual framework for the study. And then finally, I present the findings and present them in the discussions and implications section and provide some conclusions on where this study fits in within the larger paradigm of wildland fire management and local ecological knowledge. So to start off, the situation is that declining vegetative health and increasing human populations in the wildland-urban interface have created significant challenges for wildland fire management in the United States. National policies continue to place a priority on more locally based efforts to address the wildfire problem in the West and across the country. As fire management shifts towards increasing local resilience through community-based efforts, studies have focused on gaining insight into what factors increase acceptance and understanding of various fire management strategies. Behavioral hazards research identifies the impact that awareness and perception of natural hazards have on the translation of knowledge into action. Community-based efforts such as FireWise and Fire-Adapted Communities programs depend on residents to take an active role in efforts to address wildfire risk. These programs rely on local community members to conduct risk assessments based on ecological characteristics and fire history to create mitigation plans for their communities and their homes. They also encourage resident support on land management agencies by providing education about the wildfire reduction risk efforts, such as practices as prescribed fire to manage local landscapes. Ultimately, what these policy shifts call for is a new relationship between residents and land and/or fire managers. This new envisioned relationship is one of shared responsibility and collaboration between not only land managers and agencies, communities, but also the landowners to mitigate and manage wildfire risk. As a result, two outcomes of increasing importance to the forestry community are the degree to which residents both understand the ecological factors affecting fire conditions in their area and the fire management strategies used in light of these conditions. So the focus of this study is to investigate whether and how knowledge of ecological conditions is associated with the perception and understanding of appropriate fire management strategies. The following sections, I'm going to present a brief literature review that outlines two factors that impact fire management decisions, which are local ecological knowledge and education level. And this is within local residents in affected communities of wildfire. The relationship between local ecological knowledge and fire management is not always clear. Nonetheless, there is a precedent in the literature for investigating these relationships. Since there is really no single definition for what local ecological knowledge is, I'm going to go ahead and try to define it in the frame of our study. We use the definition provided by Olson and Folk in 2001, which defines local ecological knowledge as knowledge held by a specific group about their local ecosystems, and explain that local ecological knowledge may be a mix of both scientific and practical knowledge. This differs from what some researchers have defined as traditional ecological knowledge, which includes aspects of historical and cultural continuity of resource use. So because we use the definition provided by Olson and Folk, our definition incorporates knowledge of ecological characteristics typical to fire-prone ecosystems in the western United States, such as beetle kill, drought, tree density, steep terrain, blowdown, erodible soils, and the age of the forest. Through our literature review, we were able to find that knowledge about ecological characteristics can provide a framework for interpreting or responding to feedback from the local environment to guide the direction of resource management. Natural resource policymakers often invoke this relationship when implementing and administering policies. Research about local ecological knowledge in the wildfire context spans a range of how locals understand ecological characteristics and the relationship to wildfire. So, for instance, local ecological knowledge ranges from understanding that poor forest health contributes to wildfire risk to a more sophisticated understanding of how exact ecological conditions contribute to specific wildfire risk and lead to specific management actions. What remains clear in the body of literature is whether the relationship between local ecological knowledge exists in the context of wildfire response, especially as it relates to the perceptions of fire risk, fire ecology, and fire mitigation practices. Researchers have identified the importance of local ecological knowledge in creating place-based solutions and influencing perceptions that increase the acceptance of appropriate practices for mitigating fire risk. But empirical evidence for these beliefs is primarily qualitative. So in our study, we actually take a quantitative approach, which I will explain later in our method section. So according to some studies, residents in fire-prone ecosystems have a good understanding of the relationship between forest health and fire risk. So for example, Burns and Cheng in 2007 conducted key informant interviews to identify public perception of active forest management to mitigate wildland fire risk. In this study, stakeholders believe that the current conditions of the region's forests were unhealthy and forests were overly dense. So in this iteration, local ecological knowledge contributed to the public perception that forests should be actively managed to improve forest health conditions and protects against large wildfires. Researchers also suggest that the public also understands how forest-related conditions contribute to some of the specific circumstances that increase flammability. Residents and scientific experts have been shown to share similar perspectives regarding the drivers of flammability. So the fire triangle, topography, fuels, and weather. McCaffrey 2008 conducted a qualitative study of 15 focus groups in Arizona, Colorado, California, Montana, and Nevada. Within her analysis, she noticed a distinct pattern of wildfire risk perception. The first pattern was that participants generally thought about environmental conditions that would affect the odds of a fire breaking out and influence its behavior. Participants were also able to associate environmental factors with different levels of wildfire risk. Ray et al. 2012 conducted a similar qualitative study to document observations of wildfire and landscape changes with the Cayucan Forest in central Alaska. Most residents related flammability not to fire history, but actually to the specific vegetative conditions caused by the factors within the fire triangle. Dead or dry vegetation was seen as a primary cause of flammable conditions, followed by dense brush, grass, and spruce pine. Another study conducted by Wysep et al. In 2007, also taking a qualitative approach, looking at focus group feedback in Idaho, Montana, and Washington, identified themes where participants recognized ecological conditions that contributed to the overall region's wildfire risk and generally focused on the buildup of fuels in the local forest. Disagreement existed between the development and description of the current conditions, but overall residents agreed their forests were too dense with undergrowth and deadfall. There were several other studies that also were along this line showing that the residents were able to identify specific forest conditions and how they contributed to specific risks in their area. Additional research demonstrated that local communities have intricate knowledge of how specific forest-related conditions contribute to fire risk and are associated with the perceived appropriateness of fire management strategies. And this brings the research into full circle, looking from all the way from forest health to how that affects decision-making on the ground for fire management. Ryan in 2012 surveyed more than 1,000 residents in the Pine Barrow ecosystem in New Jersey and was able to identify a relationship between the knowledge of the natural areas among those stakeholders and their perceptions of fire management. Respondents who self-reported higher levels of ecological knowledge also had a better understanding of the selection of specific fire management strategies. They found that these respondents were significantly more supportive of prescribed fire treatment, and they were also more likely to think that the forest and brush fires should be allowed to burn if they did not threaten lives or property. Bernhard Smith in 2011 interviewed residents of 2 communities in Colorado to understand homeowners' perspectives on parcel approach to wildfire management, where the responsibility falls on each landowner to mitigate risk in their home ignition zone, so looking at defensible space. Within the study, residents demonstrated disagreement with this management approach based on their understanding of local ecological conditions. Residents agreed that wildland fire did not follow property lines and therefore required management across the landscape to ensure a holistic approach to mitigating fires. Another study to add to the long list of studies, Cohn et al. Used resident interview data from case studies of 6 communities affected by 2002 and 2012 wildfires in Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, and Utah to uncover individual, household, neighborhood, and community perspectives. The participants in the study identified existing forest conditions of death, overstocked understore, and high fuel loads as contributing to the magnitude and intensity of the fires that affected the community. In all the sites that were included in the study, respondents demonstrated an understanding that extremely dry conditions accompanied by strong or erratic winds along with inaccessible or steep terrain contributed to the magnitude of the fire and the selection of the specific management strategies. Although the results from most of these studies support a relationship between local ecological knowledge and both perceived understanding and acceptance of fire management strategies, there is a significant limitation in the body of literature in that it focuses on resident perceptions of local conditions associated with their perception of fire risk and management. Although I've shown that this is an important linkage towards advancing our understanding in this area, it fails to consider the accuracy of resident knowledge of ecological conditions in their area, as well as the accuracy of their understanding of the fire management strategy. And when we speak of accuracy, we mean a respondent's ability to correctly identify the prevalence of a specific forest-related condition in their area and the actual fire management strategy used to manage a local wildfire. So whereas most studies have found support for the relationship between perceived ecological knowledge and acceptance of fire management practice, the overwhelming use of single informant self-report methodologies make it impossible to rule out these effects as simply the result of mono-method bias. And what mono-method bias means is that there's an overuse of a single method at which threatens the validity of the instrument or the study in reference to the actual accuracy of the residents' knowledge of local ecological conditions. So for this study, we try to address these limitations by investigating the accuracy of resident knowledge of ecological conditions relative to that of experienced USDA forest district rangers. Accuracy in ecological knowledge is examined in its relationship to both residents' ability to correctly identify the fire management strategy used and the perception on the appropriateness of the strategy. So the overall research question that we use to guide this portion of the study is there a relationship between local ecological knowledge and fire management understanding in the context of wildfire response? The investigation for the study was guided by the following hypotheses. The first hypothesis that we created were based on the literature was accuracy in local ecological knowledge will be positively related to higher proficiencies in identifying the specific management strategy used during local wildfire response. And the second local ecological knowledge hypothesis that we created was that the accuracy in LEK will be positively related to respondent satisfaction and perceived appropriateness related to the fire management strategy used on a local wildfire. So the second factor that we explored was formal education. Findings from empirical research investigating the relationship between education level and wildfire management is generally mixed. There are a group of studies that have shown a significant relationship between education level and fire management perception. Within these studies indicated that individuals with higher education levels demonstrated concerns associated with fire, increased fire mitigation approval and preference, and advocacy for fire management in rural landscapes. Within these studies, some scholars believe that there is an unclear relationship between education level and fire management perception, which is a result of the influence of community engagement and group membership. Erickson and Gill conducted resident interviews in fire-prone areas, identifying education level as an important predictor for fire management perception related to the sentimental attachment to wildlife. Residents who completed higher levels of education considered environmental impact as an important factor in accepting fire management strategies. Another study conducted by Asher and Vask in 2006 developed a composite demographic variable that included the highest education level and found that education level influences the acceptance of prescribed fire and thinning strategies based on the assumption that increased understanding of fire ecology and fuels accumulation is associated with an increased education level. Finally, Lim et al. Discovered a significant positive relationship between education level and concern for fire management outcomes. residents with higher levels of education illustrated a decreased level of concern related to the side effects of prescribed fire, and in turn demonstrating an increased level of support for the related fire management strategies. This relationship between education level and education level and understanding environmental issues is also evident when it comes to restoration activities, climate change, and general trust in agencies who are involved in natural resource management. On the other side of the fence, other research has demonstrated that there is no significant association between education level and fire management perception. Overall, these studies focused on fuels management and treatment programs using both qualitative and quantitative methods to evaluate a possible relationship. In 2006, Fried et al. Evaluated focus group discussions and resident surveys across the country, but did not identify a significant relationship between educational attainment and acceptance of fuel management practices. Similar study conducted by Schindler et al. In 2003. They disseminated surveys and quiz-like questionnaires to residents in and around fire-prone ecosystems to evaluate longitudinal demographic differences that contributed to fuel treatment acceptance and understanding. Their study also did not find education level as a significant predictor to either understanding or supporting prescribed fire and mechanical thinning as a practice to mitigate risk. So collectively, this body of work suggests two competing propositions. Research regarding the direct linkage between education level and fire management perception and understanding has received mixed results. So further, there appears to be a growing body of literature that supports the proposition that education level is a stronger predictor of general local knowledge, but not necessarily of fire management. So to explore this relationship, we created the research question: does education level affect fire management acceptance and understanding? And to explore this question, we created the following three hypotheses that looked at the direct relationship between education level and perception and satisfaction with fire management, the relationship between education level and proficiency in identifying the actual strategy, and then education level as a mediating factor through local ecological knowledge, that education level will be positively related to greater proficiencies in identifying accurate forest-related conditions. So the conceptual framework and methods for this is a mixed methods approach where we use key informant interviews with district rangers in the affected forest. To identify the specific strategy used, we did document analysis of ICS 209 reports. For those of you that are not familiar, the incident management teams that manage the fires produce a report every day that shows how many homes are affected, what strategy used, percent containment, et cetera. So that we use those reports to inform our analysis. And then we conducted quantitative surveys with local residents and actually piloted it in 2009 and revised it based on participant recommendations. So to understand the overall project, this was actually part of the Fire Chasers project. So this is a smaller portion of that. To give you just a brief background on what Fire Chasers project is, this is a group of researchers. It's actually collaborative between North Carolina State, University of Colorado Boulder, and the USDA Forest Service Northern Research Station. And what they do is they chase fires across the western United States to understand such dynamics as collaboration between federal, state, and local entities. And specific to this research project, we are trying to understand communication between those responders and local residents, and within that, trying to understand the local community's ability to understand local ecological conditions and the fire management strategy used. So to actually chase the fires, we would look for type 1 or type 2 incidents that were handled by a federal incident management team. And all that means is these are large wildfires with large complexity. And these fires needed to be within proximity and threaten a local community where there were evacuations and road closures. The team would actually be deployed when the fire would be 40 to 60% containment to make sure that we weren't really getting in the way of the incident management team or getting in the way of the evacuation efforts. So this is once the fire was almost contained, we would actually go in and start conducting our research. So the sample frame was a set of 2010 wildfires. It was the Ecological fire in New Mexico, the Schultz fire in Arizona, and the Bull fire in California. While we interviewed district rangers, we also took a resident sample, which was 5 to 10 miles on the perimeter of each fire, and we used GIS to delineate that perimeter so that we were ensuring that we were surveying those that were most impacted by the fire and in the WUI community. So just real briefly, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of the framework and methods as far as an analysis component. But on the left side, these are all, there was the satisfaction with fire management, which was a self-indicated measure. Understanding of fire management was also self-reported measure, and appropriateness of fire management, which was, again, a self-reported measure. Strategy match was a match of the strategy based on the 209 report and what the resident identified in their survey. And these were evaluated in reference to how the residents viewed the importance of ecological needs, and then within an ecological knowledge index. So each resident was asked the prevalence of 7 forest-related conditions, which you can see at the bottom: beetle kill, blowdown, drought, tree density, steep rain, erodible soils, and age of forest. And these responses were compared with the responses of district ranger to the district rangers on the forest, who created an additive index from 0 to 7. So 0 is they did not correctly identify any of the forest-related conditions, and 7 was they related the prevalence of all 7. To understand the relationship between education level, local ecological knowledge, and fire management, we took the same self-reported metrics as you see on the top: satisfaction, understanding, and appropriateness, as well as the strategy match, and added the ecological index that I just spoke of, and then compared that with a self-reported metric of education level, which included everything from high school to a PhD within the survey. So the results of the study, we saw that most survey respondents felt very satisfied with fire management decision-making, which was 57%, approximately 260 folks, 258 to be exact. Most respondents felt they somewhat understood the strategy utilized at 55%, and they felt the strategy was very appropriate to manage the fire. When asked to identify the actual strategy used, which on all 3 was direct suppression, around 50% identified the correct strategy. 26.7 identified some incorrect strategy, whether it was indirect suppression or prescribed fire use. There was a list of different strategies that we had in there. And then 22.9% directly said they did not know what the strategy was. So our findings were robust across several measurements, and found that local ecological knowledge is positively associated with a better understanding of fire management. First off, 86%, about 352 folks, identified ecological needs as somewhat or very important in the acceptance of fire management strategy, with more than half, 54%, stating it was very important. We ran correlation analysis and found that the ecological knowledge index, perception of appropriateness, perception of satisfaction, understanding, and education level, there was all significant relationships there. We also conducted a linear regression analysis and found that ecological knowledge was the only significant variable. I'm not going to bore you with this slide. This pretty much showed that there was an increased odds of identifying the specific strategy based on increased proficiencies in local ecological knowledge. And I'll refer you to the odds ratio at the bottom. So there was a 1.219 probability of increased identification of fire management based on local ecological knowledge. The next slide brings that to bear as far as what does that mean. So within the index, if an individual did not correctly identify any of the ecological conditions, there was a 38% chance that they would actually identify the correct fire management strategy. And as you go up, it goes all the way up all 7, there was a 71% chance. So it was showing that accuracy in identifying ecological conditions was directly related to accuracy in identifying the correct fire management strategy. There was no significant relationship with satisfaction, understanding, and appropriateness, and there was no statistical difference with strategy match within those variables. But again, there was a statistically significant relationship with local ecological knowledge when looking at formal education. Formal education, again, was found to be a significant predictor of local ecological knowledge. So that while there wasn't a direct relationship to fire management, it shows that those that had participated in some sort of college, had a college experience, had a higher percentage of being able to identify specific forest-related conditions. So what we actually did was we created a variable of high and low proficiency, and if you look at your slide, it's called eco-knowledge greater than or equal to 4. So those with high proficiency and low proficiency, and found that those at higher proficiencies were those that had participated in college in some form or fashion. So for residents to better understand the issues facing wildfire management, based on this research, we feel like collaborative efforts should focus on improving understanding about prevalent ecological conditions that may affect fire management decision-making. We found that evidence from the Ecology and Wildfires demonstrated that respondent accuracy in identifying local ecological conditions was associated with an increased odds in making the correct identification of that strategy used, and you saw that in the table that I presented. Respondents who were able to make accurate identifications of all 7 forest-related conditions had a 71% probability, where those that made 0 correct identifications had a probability of 38%. We also found that local ecological knowledge may affect resident acceptance of fire management strategies. Our data identified a significant yet weak positive relationship between accuracy and local ecological knowledge and respondent satisfaction on how the fire was managed. A significant negative relationship was found to be related to the accuracy of the local ecological knowledge variable and perceived appropriateness of the strategy used. So these findings actually support the work of Cohn et al. That found that those who have greater local ecological knowledge proficiencies may be more informed and in turn more critical stakeholders in the process. So just because they're more informed, they're not necessarily more accepting of fire management strategies. Within our research, we found that formal education level does not play a statistically significant role in public perception or understanding of fire management, but is in fact associated with increased proficiencies in local ecological knowledge. As I mentioned previously, individuals who have completed higher levels of formal education did not rate fire management differently or have a better understanding of the specific strategies used, but education level did serve a significant predictor for local ecological knowledge. Those who had the opportunity of participating in collegiate studies had a higher proficiency in identifying forest-related conditions. The results of our study indicated that formal education may play a mediating role in understanding of complex environmental issues such as fire management and climate change, but as I said earlier, does not demonstrate that direct association between ecological conditions and accuracy in identifying fire management decisions. So these results support previous research suggesting that education level serves as a predictor for acceptance of flexible fire management strategies, with the overarching assumption being that increased understanding of fire ecology and fuels accumulation is associated with increased education. So what does this mean from a management and policy standpoint? While multiple wildfire management strategies beyond suppression only will be needed to address the challenges of large fire, if we want to create wildfire resilient landscapes and community, more flexible fire management means the ability to implement multiple strategies but dependent on factors such as fire risk, fire behavior, and ecological conditions. Knowledge about ecological characteristics can provide a framework for interpreting and responding to feedback from the local environment to guide the direction of resource management. This research suggests that increasing knowledge about ecological characteristics may increase the community's understanding of the actual strategy used to manage wildfire response, which we felt was an important step to provide more flexible fire management options for wildfire resilient communities. The policy implication from this research is that efforts to increase locals' understanding about ecological conditions can result in greater tolerance for and appreciation of different fire management strategies. The important activities that we identified to increase knowledge of ecological conditions include collaborative planning, implementation, and adaptive management through sharing of lessons learned via a range of engagement and communication media. These joint problem-solving activities provide land and fire managers the opportunity to work with residents to improve understanding of land uses, management goals, and overall fire management strategies. So in conclusion, policymakers, natural resource managers, and scientists have identified a relationship between declining forest health across the national landscape and the increasing risk of catastrophic wildfire, which threatens both landscapes and communities. The National Wildfire Coordinating Executive Group in 2011 found that for nearly a decade, national policies have encouraged federal, state, and local agencies responsible for wildland fire management to work collaboratively with communities to mitigate their fire risk. Research offers evidence that better understanding of natural resource management issues can shape public perception of and support of various fire management strategies. And also, multiple studies have identified formal education as a foundation for understanding these local environmental issues. Local understanding of fire management strategies and perceptions of the appropriateness of the strategy may be important preconditions for accepting the fire management strategies. We need a better understanding of what is driving the public's understanding of fire management strategies and how they are perceived. We believe that flexible fire management means the ability to implement multiple strategies depending on factors such as risk, behavior, and ecological conditions. And fostering a shared understanding between the managers and the local communities will continue to be important as fire management agencies want to implement more flexible fire management strategies in the face of more complex fires in the wildland-urban interface. As a result of the study, we feel that there is more room for investigating the questions from research perspective focusing on the sources of ecological knowledge. One of the directions for it may be to better understand community engagement and group membership and its mediating role between education and ecological knowledge as suggested in the qualitative literature on the topic, and look at traditional ecological knowledge, which is defined as a cumulative body of knowledge, practice, and beliefs passed over time. Although the study did not focus on this aforementioned nexus, it is apparent that there are complex relationships at play. It is important, we believe, to gain insight into the factors that contribute to information source choice, as well as the differences that affect the understanding of fire management strategies. And again, I'd like to acknowledge some of the collaborators on this project, Northern Research Station, Joint Fire Science Program, folks over here at NC State and the Fire Chasers Project, Southern Fire Exchange, and the Association of Fire Ecology. Thank you, and I will take any questions.
Great. John, thank you so much for that presentation. We did have a few questions coming into the chat box, and I'll, we have some more that are coming in. I'm going to go ahead and ask them in the order that they arrived in the chat box. One question was, why were Type 3 and 4 IC team fires also not looked at?
We wanted to look at the most intense and complex fires and the ones that encroach most on the local communities, so it had that large WUI footprint. So we were really looking at the more WUI footprint and the larger, more complex fires.
Got it. All right. The next question that came in was another question. Did you collect data on participant background, i.e., were there natural resource managers or fire folks among the participants?
We did not. We looked specifically at how long they had lived in the area, how they would classify their land, so rural, suburban, urban, previous experience with wildfire, but we didn't look at anything that looked at their specific background as far as a job classification experience.
Okay, so previous experience with wildfire, how was that question posed?
Have you previously experienced a wildfire?
Okay.
Yep.
So it wasn't degree to which. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Another comment that came in was, it seems a subtle bias toward, does the public perceive our choice process in fire management?
I did not get that. Can you repeat that question?
It looked like it was more of a comment than a question, but it seems.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, the comment I think was, it seems a subtle bias toward, does the public perceive our choice process in fire management? So maybe the question is there a subtle bias toward, does the public perceive our choice process in fire management?
We really didn't look at that component. We were really looking at just the relationship between the two. There were some comments as part of the study that gave each resident an opportunity to provide their, I guess, insights or how they felt the fire was managed. That wasn't included in the study, but there was some sentiments as far as bias and things of that nature in regards to how the fire was managed, but that was a very small subset of the respondents, and they seemed that those respondents were more along the elderly folks, and they had been living there for a very long time. So I don't know if it had to do with the national teams coming in or what exactly was the dynamic there, but there was a little bit of that at play, but it wasn't, again, part of this study.
Okay, and yeah, Tim has clarified. He says, more specifically, does that bias affect buy-in?
Does that bias affect buy-in?
Yeah, I think we'll open up the phone lines in a minute for maybe more of a conversation, but I think you might be looking for, maybe a better understanding of what buy-in means.
Oh, you're talking about as far as residents buying into the actual, to using different fire management strategies?
Tim, you want to type into the chat box your quick answer, or if not, we could save this for the first discussion point.
Public buy-in into the decision process.
Yeah.
So is he trying to say how it manifested within the study, or just overall what the public buy-in is in the decision process?
I'm not sure. I can't see in the chat box. I think we'll probably come back to that one.
Okay.
But we had another question that was similar to Barb's question. Did the study look at participant interest in natural resources and environmental issues? Do you think that may influence the respondents' local ecological knowledge? We
did not explore that. We just looked at their perception of how local ecological needs played into selecting the specific strategy used. None of that was included in the study.
Okay. Let's see. I had another question for you. So how has your definition of local ecological knowledge changed as a result of your studies?
I tend to lean more towards the traditional ecological knowledge component, where I feel like their understanding of local conditions is more of their relationship with the local context over time. But for this study, we wanted to look at their specific ability to identify conditions. But I believe that, as we said, there is more at play than their ability to identify if there's beetle kill in the area or if there's a dense understory, and understanding it all the whole paradigm.
Okay, great. Let's see. So pardon me for a minute. I need to read my tiny print in the chat box.
Sure.
Okay, there was another question. Are there any case examples of an organization implementing the recommended strategies? And if so, how did this impact their fire management?
Well, there's a large collaborative effort that deals with wildfire decision-making and fire management in general, known as the Fire Learning Network, where it's collaborative planning and implementation that brings together state agencies, federal agencies, private landowners to share lessons learned, plan mitigation strategies. So there's a lot out there that's evoking this collaborative approach so that landowners feel like they're part of the process, understand where these agency professionals are coming from, so that when a wildfire does occur, there's not the perception of an outsider coming in. They've developed these relationships going into it, and the things seem to be more seamless.
Okay, thank you. I had another question in the chat box, which was, did you look at age of the public and their acceptance of various fire management strategies?
We did look at age, and there wasn't a statistically significant relationship between age and any of the variables that we looked at. Like I said before, there was some of the older folks that provided comments, but it didn't seem like within the qualitative portion of it that it had any effect at all.
Okay. All right. I'm not seeing other questions in the chat box at this time. My computer was giving me a little hiccup. So I think this is actually a good time to open up the phone lines. And we can probably start with Tim Kirkpatrick had the comment and question before.
Okay.
So I'm about to open up the phone lines. And Tim, if you want to start us off, and other folks, if you have questions, feel free to jump in and ask them as we answer them. So here we go. All right. So can folks hear and speak now? And Tim, would you like to start off with your question about public buy-in to the decision process?
Sure. I specifically was asking about an underlying aspect of the way the research was constructed, which is whether or not people are actually understanding our decision process and buying into those choices that we make for fire management.
So at a superficial level, it was looking at their perception of how appropriate the the fire management strategy was and how satisfied they were with it in relationship to their understanding of what the actual strategy was. But it did not get into that level of detail of what you're looking at. I think a follow-up qualitative study could look at something like that, but this was a really large study, and this is a small component of that study. So the overall focus of this was understanding residents' satisfaction with communication before, during, and after the fire. And this was just a small component that was nested in there, looking at satisfaction, perceived appropriateness, their understanding of the conditions, and their understanding of what the actual strategy was.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, good question. Anybody else have a question that you'd like to ask John? I have, if there isn't an immediate question, keep thinking about questions. But I have another question maybe for John, but also for other folks who are on the call. How can we as practitioners, scientists, collaborators who are working with fire, how can we help to increase local ecological knowledge? Anybody?
So the way that I've seen it that's taken place that's been very effective is getting landowners out in the field, and not only in their own property, but across the entire WUI. So as much as a workshop will work in a building, having them out in the field has seemed to be very effective. In the eastern part of North Carolina, we've done that a lot, specifically around the Croatan National Forest. We've noticed that residents are understanding the local conditions a little bit more, and in turn they're adopting specific practices, whether it be, trimming the area around their house to create defensible space, or participating more in their local fire-wise initiatives. So getting them out in the field has been a really effective approach towards not only increasing their local ecological knowledge, but having them feel like they're part of the process and start adopting preventative strategies to mitigate wildfire and increase the resilience of the landscape.
Great. Yeah, that's really interesting. I've definitely had great impact from folks that have gotten out in the field as well. I wonder if some other folks who are on the call, if anybody agrees, disagrees, has other thoughts on how we can increase local ecological knowledge.
Hi, this is Marianne. I am on an incident management team out of the Northern Rockies, as well as I do fire info and ed on my local unit. But the Northern Rockies teams carry liaison officers, and what I've noticed, and especially from our team, is that just having that person dedicated to those stakeholders, and even though the management's going on at the time, really helps to build the trust, which I think definitely adds to, education and all that kind of stuff. But when we've had teams on my forest that did not have liaison officers, it was more difficult.
I would have to agree with that. What we saw with the fires we chased in the western part of the state, the liaison officer was not only a great plug-in for ourselves, but we noticed them interfacing with the local communities, and just the interface and the personality characteristics and the skill sets of those liaison officers really went a long way to have the communities informed on what was going on and have them trust the incident management teams that were there. Sometimes, federal incident management teams in certain communities across the West don't really have the best reputation. So having those liaison officers in the field and engaged with local communities, I've seen throughout my own experience, has been really effective.
Yeah, and I think it was really important. I feel it helps the team as well in the IC to get a better feel for what's happening out there and what they should pay attention to and understand and talk with, or they need to put their attention to it a little bit also.
That's great feedback. So I heard liaison, trust, and ownership as some ways to help increase local ecological knowledge and perhaps communications in general. Do other folks have thoughts that you'd like to contribute?
This is Tim Kirkpatrick again. One of the things that I've seen in this area, in Albuquerque, New Mexico vicinity, And one of the biggest elements that I found that observed over the years was having a good PIO with your incident team and their engagement in getting information out, as well as now especially adding in social media contact and interchange really made a huge difference in the level and response from the communities around the event.
Thank you.
This is Marianne again. So my day job on the National Forest is to do fire information and education. Another gal from the BLM and I have both instigated programs within some of the local schools that the children are getting each year we take a week, and every day one grade gets some level of education about wildfire. And so the thought is from kindergarten up until whatever grade you go through. I think I go through 6th, she goes through 8th or 9th, but that they're getting a very basic, they probably know more than the adults do by the time they get to high school. And then I think for my thought is that they're also taking that knowledge home. And sometimes it's easier to listen to your kids than it is to listen to the federal government, so to speak. But it seems to have made, I have only done this 2 years now, but just in the general work that I've done in education since 2001, the kids definitely understand fire and the need for it, and I get less deer in the headlights when it comes to the understanding of why we need some fire and its importance to the ecosystem, thus going into how we're going to fight those fires. In fact, in Yellowstone one year, I was a public information officer, and there seemed to be a paradigm shift that year because there was a fire that was way high up in some nasty country, and the public couldn't understand why they were not, at that point, fighting that fire differently. So it's getting there, and I think education, starting with young kids, is a huge help, but of course the funding isn't there for that generally.
Sure.
Yeah.
I have a quick follow-up question. So I was just curious, what kind of activities are you doing with the kids out in the fields and teaching them about fire?
Oh, well, my basis is there's a curriculum that was developed by the Fire Lab out of Missoula.
Okay.
So I utilize those, and then I go from there. I have a background in education, so and then just sometimes just going to burned areas and getting an appreciation for them, and realizing that it's not a moonscape anymore, that it's new life, all that basic stuff. But just using any kind of activities. And then recently, once in a while I try to, if I get into educating adults, I do. But it's amazing when some older adults that had a lot of smoky time get to understand things like serotinous cones or blackback woodpeckers or whatever it is. So, and I balance that with the need to fight fire as well.
Okay.
I'd second that also. I'm also a member of the East Mountain Interagency Fire Protection Association, which covers the Sandia Ranger District. And we have a member, John Helmick, and a couple of others who have been doing a similar education program with the elementary schools, kindergarten and first graders, and it has had a huge impact on their parents recognizing the need for being aware about with their environment and also the mitigation measures that need to be done. So thank you, Marianne.
You're welcome.
Well, this is very cool. We're getting a couple more comments in the chat box. Chris says, we're looking to introduce fire-adapted education into mainstream K-12 education. It seems to be sorely lacking in public schools, and educating kids often helps reach the parents, as Marianne had said. Chris also says, one school we worked with prepped the kids for almost a semester, and we brought a sim table in to top it off for 2 days. And we got better and more intelligent questions from the 6th graders than I ever had from community meeting audits, with a smiley face. Sorry, community meeting adults. So yeah, thank you for that comment.
So actually I have a question to follow up with that. What are you guys currently doing to try to get it into the education of mainstream K through 12? Because I know just environmental science in general is lacking in the primary and secondary schools. So what's your strategy for getting that into the school system?
Go ahead.
Mine's real quick, because what John is doing is actually going to the elementary schools in the East Mountains and presenting this through the teachers as a special little program that they insert as part of their general curriculum.
Gotcha.
And the fireworks curriculum actually is tied to science standards, so that is somewhat helpful, but I've realized that any way I can help a teacher to do what they normally do, which kind of is tied into that, whether they can come to the woods or they can't, most of them are pretty happy to think that someone could actually come in and teach their kids or take time. And I mean, most of them will have some time to do something like that and to tie it into their science or to know what grade goes with what they're learning. Like 6th graders, I do a lot of fire behavior with matchstick forest and whatnot, and we always talk about they learn about vortexes, so I always bring up fire whirls and stuff like that. So helping them do their job.
Very cool.
So, are you having a lab meeting here, or is that a question in the background? All right. Well, I'll cut in with another comment from the chat box. Chris also says, I have a PhD educator who is putting it into Common Core curriculum, and it is being piloted this spring in one school in Santa Fe. Pretty awesome. So my coworker Xander, maybe his kids are going to get a dose of that soon. Quick turning back, so Alan Hook asked, in response to Tim's comment about fire managers and PIO's usage of social media, I'm curious what media related to smoke with wildfires or even prescribed fires, it seems some of the traditional press releases or website statements are not effective.
Real quickly, what the PIOs in the area that I'm aware of are using is they're actually monitoring Facebook and Twitter and have the official access port that the agencies involved are responding from, so you don't wind up with people jumping in who are, quote, knowledgeable, who are in fact not actually participants or trained with the agencies, so that there is an immediate response, or as quick as possible response to questions people have, but from the PIO sourcing, so that they're not getting misinformation or misleading information about what's going on and what's happening in the vicinity.
Yeah, I've seen that too. It's really important to have those PIOs on social media to help mitigate the rumor mill, because everyone nowadays feels like they're journalists and need to educate or inform the public and inform them with all kinds of misinformation. So those PIOs being plugged into Twitter and Facebook and all the different outlets to make sure that correct information is going out there has been very important for some pretty good outcomes on different fires that I've seen.
And I've also noticed, I haven't done a ton with Facebook, but somewhat to a limited amount, and I'm not a PIO on a Type 2, but I do Type 3. But utilizing the local Facebook pages, maybe it's a county page, those kind of things, so that you have a close relationship with those people so that they are also putting out good information and you're utilizing them. Yeah.
That's a good suggestion. We had another participant who said Twitter is very effective, Alan. So another vote for Twitter in the PIO in response.
And INCIWeb's been huge, even if it has its issues. People know it. Oh, yeah. When they don't get it, they look for it.
All right. Well, I'm seeing that we're just after 4 o'clock Eastern time, so we're just after the hour. I'd say folks are welcome to stay on the line and keep the conversation going. This is really interesting. But before we lose everybody, please, everybody join me in virtual applause or some kind of audible cheering. Please help me thank John for his wonderful presentation today. Great job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, guys.
And there are several thank yous coming into the chat box as well. So, all right. As folks are signing off, in the chat box there were a few links that were put in for several references. So I encourage you to take a look at the chat box, and I will see if we can get some of these references on the Southwest Fire Science Consortium website as well. Again, this is really great discussion.
And for those of you that are looking at an educational component, I put a link for eFire, which is a virtual prescribed fire education tool that we're creating here at NC State. that allows, if you're not able to get out there on a prescribed burn, that this is a virtual way of participating on a burn and understanding how it works and what the ecosystem is that requires it. So I encourage you to check it out.
Cool. Very cool. All right. Any other questions or comments from folks?
This is Marianne again. Hopefully your study will get to some of the managers and some of the folks that give a lot of lip service to education. They understand the importance, but maybe don't want to put money towards it. Some of our positions getting cut. Not mine, but
I sure hope so. We're going to, hopefully through the consortia, try to get the information out to different managers so they understand the value of educating the public. So this is more of a community-driven deal than the incident management teams just feeling like they can come in and do what they need to do without informing the public and educating them on how they can be a part of the solution.
Yeah, so it's all equal players with the need for Pulaski's on the ground also.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and I've seen places where the landowners felt like they could have contributed to some of the response to whether they had helicopters or drip torches or water pumps or et cetera. So plugging them into the response network because they're knowledgeable folks would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and if our teams don't understand the expertise that's out there, at least with the ranchers in eastern Montana, they, if nothing else, you got to listen to them because sometimes you're going to learn something from them. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to send you all the NCSC Fire Chasers project. There's a lot of the research that you guys have been talking about. Most recently, looking at how incident management teams plug into local networks and how they use local ecological knowledge to make fire management decisions based on the feedback of key leaders in local communities. So there's a bunch of different reports on there that I recommend you guys checking out.
Thank you.
That's awesome. On the education thing, I just want to add a plug. I've worked on a separate but interestingly related topic, watershed protection, over in the Providence watershed in Rhode Island. There's a great education program for elementary school kids that gets kids, helping protect watersheds, protecting their watershed and protecting the water for 750,000 people. So yeah, I think that public education starting at a young age can really help. Another thought, I wonder, there's Project Learning Tree, educating folks about forestry and forest management. I wonder if there's any parallels or similarities or ways to integrate kind of the component of fire and forest health overall. But these are really good thoughts, and I really enjoyed hearing this discussion. Anybody else have comments or questions you'd like to add? All right. Well, once again, thank you, John, and thank you, everybody, for being part of this webinar today. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye. Have a good one, everyone.
All right. Thank you.